The poor boy lived in a small, crowded neighborhood where the houses were old, cracked, and barely protected people from the rain. The streets were narrow, dusty, and always full of people rushing somewhere, yet somehow nothing ever seemed to get better. He lived with his mother, younger sister, and a little brother in a tiny, one-room home. The roof leaked whenever it rained, and the walls were stained from years of wear, but it was the only place they could call home. His father had left when he was very young, and the boy had learned early on that life could be unfair and unpredictable. Every morning, he woke up before the sun rose, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him even though he was just a child. There was no time to play or relax. Every day was about surviving, helping his mother with chores, fetching water from the public tap, and running errands. Food was never guaranteed, and sometimes they had to eat whatever scraps they could find or go to bed hungry. Watching his siblings sleep peacefully while he lay awake, worrying about how to get even a single meal the next day, filled him with a strange mix of sadness and determination. School was not much better. He loved learning, but his uniform was always torn, and his shoes had holes big enough to let in rainwater. Some days, he couldn't even attend class because his mother needed him to work or help at home. His classmates would sometimes laugh at him, teasing him for wearing old clothes or carrying a broken bag. It hurt, but he refused to let it destroy his dream of a better life. He knew that education was his only chance to escape the poverty that seemed to surround him like a thick, heavy fog. Despite all these challenges, he had an extraordinary imagination. He would often sit on the roof of his house in the evening, staring at the fading orange sky, dreaming of a world beyond his small neighborhood. He imagined towering buildings, shiny cars, and people who seemed to have everything he could only dream of. He dreamed of becoming someone important, someone who could change not only his life but also the lives of his family. His dreams were his only escape from reality, and they made him feel strong, even when the world seemed determined to keep him weak. The boy had learned to be resourceful. He ran errands for neighbors to earn a little money, helped in small shops, and sometimes collected bottles or old newspapers to sell. Every coin he earned felt like a small victory, a step closer to something bigger. Still, the struggle was never ending. There were days when the rain ruined his work or illness struck the family, and he felt powerless. Yet, even in the darkest times, he refused to give up. He often whispered to himself, "One day, things will be different. One day, I will make my family proud." His mother worked tirelessly, cleaning other people's houses, washing clothes, and doing whatever she could to keep the family afloat. She rarely rested, and the boy admired her courage and strength, even though it broke his heart to see her so tired every day. She encouraged him to keep going to school, telling him that knowledge was more valuable than money and that one day, his efforts would pay off. Her words became his guiding light, and he held on to them like a treasure. Life had taught him patience, resilience, and the importance of hope. Every challenge, every hunger pang, every night spent worried about the next day, built something inside him, a determination that would not easily be broken. He knew that his circumstances were harsh, but he also knew that giving up was not an option. He wanted more than survival. He wanted a life where he could smile without fear, where his siblings could play freely, and where he could feel proud of himself. Even though the world around him seemed cold and unfair, he never lost his kindness or curiosity. He would help younger children in the neighborhood with their lessons, share what little food he had with those even poorer, and listen to the stories of elders in the community, learning lessons from their struggles. These small acts of empathy and courage made him special, even if no one outside his family realized it. And so, the poor boy's life was a delicate balance between harsh reality and unwavering dreams. Every day was a struggle, every moment a challenge, but inside him burned a small flame of hope, flickering but refusing to die. It was this hope, this resilience, that would soon lead him to a moment that would change his life forever, a moment when he would find the courage to speak up, to yell out to someone who seemed unreachable, and begin a journey from poverty to possibility. Even amid the hardships of his everyday life, the boy never let go of his dreams. He had learned early that life was unpredictable and cruel, but somewhere deep inside, He believed that he was meant for something more than hunger, struggle, and endless days of work. While other children his age played without a care, he spent his evenings imagining a life where poverty did not define him, where opportunities were endless, and where he could help his family rise above the hardships that seemed to follow them everywhere. The boy's dreams were not vague wishes, they were vivid, detailed, and alive in his mind. He pictured himself walking down clean streets, passing towering buildings with shiny windows that reflected the sunlight like diamonds. He imagined entering grand offices, shaking hands with people who had achieved great success, and being greeted with respect rather than pity. Most of all, he imagined his mother smiling without worry, his siblings laughing freely, and a home filled with warmth, laughter, and comfort instead of cold nights and empty stomachs. These dreams were a lifeline, something that made the endless struggle bearable and gave him strength to face each day. But dreams alone were not enough. The boy knew that if he wanted to change his life, he needed knowledge, courage, and persistence. Every time he walked to school, he studied everything around him, the way people carried themselves, the way some seemed confident and powerful, and how the world worked for those with ambition and skill. He watched how shopkeepers managed their businesses, how drivers navigated the bustling streets, and how even the smallest details could make a difference in someone's success. In his mind, he collected lessons from every sight, every sound, and every experience, storing them like precious coins that would one day help him buy a better life. At night, after helping his mother with chores and putting his siblings to sleep, the boy would sit by the small window of their home, staring at the distant city lights that twinkled like stars. To him, those lights were more than electricity, they were symbols of possibility, proof that the world outside his neighborhood could be brighter and bigger than the life he had known. He would imagine himself walking toward those lights, step by step, never looking back, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the journey would not be easy but believing that it would be worth every struggle. The boy also found inspiration in stories he heard from neighbors, travelers, and old books he could occasionally borrow from school. Tales of people who rose from nothing to greatness, who dared to take risks and break boundaries, became fuel for his determination. He imagined himself as one of those people, someone who could rise above adversity through bravery, cleverness, and hard work. Each story planted a seed in his mind, shaping his vision of a future where he could make a real difference, not just for himself but for those he loved. Yet, his dreams were not just about wealth or comfort, they were about freedom and courage. The boy wanted the power to choose his own path, to speak up without fear, to challenge the limits imposed by his circumstances. He dreamed of a life where his voice mattered, where he could stand tall among those who seemed untouchable, and where courage, not status, defined a person's worth. This longing to be heard, to make a mark in a world that often ignored people like him, was a constant companion, whispering to him that one day, his moment would come. Every morning, the boy carried his dreams with him, hidden beneath worn-out clothes and dusty shoes, tucked carefully in his heart. He imagined the doors those dreams could open, the people he could meet, and the lessons he could learn. And though his environment was harsh and unforgiving, the dreams gave him resilience. When he faced teasing, hunger, or disappointment, he reminded himself that this was just a chapter in a larger story, one that he was determined to write himself. And so, the boy's dreams became more than fantasies, they became a plan, a roadmap for the life he longed for. With every passing day, the desire to step into a world of opportunity grew stronger, and he resolved that one day, he would do something bold, something unforgettable, that would bring him closer to the life he imagined. The dreams were no longer just his secret escape, they were a promise, a mission, and a call to action that would soon lead him to a moment that could change everything. One ordinary afternoon, when the sun was high and the streets were buzzing with life, something unusual happened that would change the boy's life forever. The narrow lanes of his neighborhood, usually filled with the familiar sounds of children playing, vendors calling out, and the occasional dog barking, suddenly seemed quieter, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Rumors had spread that a famous millionaire was visiting the town, a man whose name was whispered with awe in every corner of the city. People said he had built an empire from nothing, starting with only a dream, just like the boy often dreamed of. At first, the boy did not think much of it. He had seen many, important people, visit the town before, and most of them ignored the people around them, stepping over the crowds without a second glance. But something inside him told him that this time might be different. His heart raced with curiosity and hope, and he could not resist the urge to see the man with his own eyes. He slipped away from the chores that had been assigned to him for the day and ran toward the small open square where the millionaire was supposed to appear. When he arrived, the boy was met with a sea of people. Merchants had stopped selling, children were clinging to their parents, and every adult was craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the man who seemed untouchable. From a distance, the boy saw the millionaire, a tall man, dressed impeccably, with a confident posture and a calm expression. He was surrounded by assistants, cameras, and a small group of admirers who laughed and chatted as though the world outside the square did not exist. To the boy, the scene was overwhelming and intimidating. The millionaire looked larger than life, like a figure out of one of the stories the boy loved, someone who lived in a world the boy could only imagine. For a moment, he considered turning back. Maybe he should go home, go back to the chores, go back to the life he had always known. But then he remembered all the nights he had spent dreaming, staring at the distant city lights, imagining a better life for himself and his family. He remembered the whispers of encouragement from his mother, telling him to never stop believing, and the lessons he had learned from the struggles he had already faced. Something inside him snapped, and he felt a courage that surprised even himself. He could not let this chance pass by. The boy moved closer, weaving through the crowd with a mixture of fear and determination. Every step felt heavy, as if the world was trying to push him back, but he pressed forward. Finally, he was close enough to see the millionaire's face clearly. His heart pounded so loudly that he thought it might give him away, yet he knew he had to do it. He had to speak up, no matter how impossible it seemed. Then, gathering every ounce of bravery, he took a deep breath and yelled. His voice cracked at first, raw with emotion, but it carried across the square. The crowd turned, some laughing, some shocked, and for a moment, the boy felt invisible again, as if his words would vanish into the air. But then, to his astonishment, the millionaire stopped. He turned his head, his eyes meeting the boy's, and for the first time, the boy felt seen. In that moment, everything else faded. The chatter of the crowd, the flashing cameras, the tall buildings around them, all of it disappeared. It was just the boy and the millionaire, two people from completely different worlds, connected by a single act of courage. The boy could feel the beating of his own heart in his chest and the weight of his dreams pressing forward, demanding attention. He had dared to do what no one else would, and the world, in the form of this powerful man, had paused to listen. For the first time, the boy realized that courage was not about strength, wealth, or status. It was about daring to step forward when everyone else stepped back. It was about speaking even when the world seemed too big, too distant, or too unkind to hear him. And in that shared moment, he felt a spark of hope he had never felt before, a whisper telling him that maybe, just maybe, dreams could meet reality if one was brave enough to yell loud enough for the world to hear. The boy's heart raced like never before. For a moment, standing amidst the crowd, he froze. The millionaire was just a few steps away, his eyes scanning the people, his expression calm yet commanding. Everyone else seemed intimidated, their faces a mixture of awe and fear, but the boy felt something rise inside him that was stronger than fear, determination. He knew that if he turned back now, all his dreams, all the hopes he had carried through years of struggle, would remain just that, dreams. This was the moment to act. He clenched his small fists, feeling the rough calluses from years of work and responsibility, and took a deep breath. Then, louder than he had ever dared before, he yelled again. This time, there was no hesitation, no tremor. His voice carried his pain, his hope, and his dreams all at once. It rang through the square like a bell, slicing through the murmur of the crowd and catching the attention of everyone around him. People stopped, staring in disbelief at the audacity of this poor boy, and whispers began to spread. Did he just yell at the millionaire? The millionaire, who had been talking calmly with his assistants, turned fully toward the boy. For a moment, there was silence, and the boy felt like the entire world had stopped moving. He could see the surprise in the man's eyes, but also something else, curiosity, a flicker of interest that made the boy's heart leap. He had done it. Against all odds, he had made himself seen and heard. Encouraged by the man's reaction, the boy took another step forward, feeling a surge of courage he had never known existed. He shouted his message, pouring everything he had into his words, the struggles of his family, the harshness of his life, and the dreams he refused to give up. He spoke of empty stomachs, torn shoes, and late nights spent wishing for a better tomorrow. He spoke of hope, of courage, and of the belief that one day, he could change everything if only someone would notice him, if only someone would believe in him. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Some adults shook their heads, thinking he was too bold, too young, too insignificant to matter. Children looked on with wide eyes, inspired by his bravery. And the millionaire, he stopped, listened, and nodded ever so slightly, signaling that he was paying attention. The boy's voice trembled with emotion, but he refused to stop. Every word was a piece of his soul laid bare, every shout a step closer to a dream he had carried silently for years. As he spoke, the boy noticed something remarkable. The people around him, who had once seemed indifferent or amused, now watched with respect. They could see his courage, and it forced them to see him not as a poor boy, but as someone with a story worth hearing. It was a strange, exhilarating feeling, powerful, yet humbling. For the first time in his life, he realized that courage could not be measured by wealth, status, or age. It could only be measured by the willingness to act when it mattered most. Finally, when he finished speaking, the boy stood still, exhausted, his chest heaving, his throat sore, and his hands shaking. The square was silent for a moment longer, and then the millionaire smiled, a small, approving smile that seemed to carry more weight than all the riches in the world. He walked toward the boy, stopping just a few feet away, and for the first time, the boy felt truly seen, truly acknowledged. In that instant, he understood that this bold action, this one daring moment of courage, had changed something fundamental. The boy had learned a lesson no school could ever teach him, that sometimes, taking a risk, speaking your truth, and standing boldly in front of the world could create opportunities that no amount of preparation could ever guarantee. The bold action he had taken, shouting to the millionaire, exposing his struggles, and refusing to be invisible, was not just an act of bravery. It was the beginning of a journey, the first step in transforming his dreams into reality. And in the boy's heart, amid the pounding of his chest and the thrill of having been heard, he knew something profound: courage is contagious. One bold action can ripple through the world, touching lives, opening doors, and changing destinies. This moment, raw and daring, was his first victory, a victory not measured in wealth or power, but in hope, courage, and the promise of a future he was determined to create. The crowd held its breath. For a moment, the world seemed frozen, the boy's bold words hanging in the air like a daring challenge. The millionaire, standing just a few feet away, paused. His eyes, sharp yet kind, studied the boy carefully. He could see the dirt on the boy's clothes, the calluses on his hands, the exhaustion in his posture, but more than that, he could see something rare, courage, raw and unfiltered, shining from a heart that had endured hardships no one could fully understand. The millionaire did not laugh, as many in the crowd had feared. He did not turn away or scold the boy for daring to speak. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, narrowing the distance between them. Every person watching felt a tension in the air, a mixture of surprise and awe. How often did someone so young, so vulnerable, dare to stand up to a man who seemed untouchable? And yet here he was, and the millionaire's reaction would decide more than just the boy's afternoon, it would decide the direction of his life. The boy, sensing the shift, felt his heart leap. His hands trembled, his throat was dry, and his legs ached from the hours spent weaving through the crowd, but he refused to show fear. Every ounce of nervousness melted away as he realized that this was no longer a distant dream, it was real. The millionaire's eyes were on him, truly on him, and for the first time, the boy felt the power of being truly seen. Then came the first sign of acknowledgement. The millionaire bent slightly, bringing his face closer to the boy's level, not in condescension, but in attention. "You are brave," he said, his voice calm but firm, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "It is not easy to speak your truth in front of so many people, especially when you have so little." The words were simple, but to the boy, they felt monumental. It was as if someone had reached into his heart and recognized every struggle, every sacrifice, every silent dream he had carried for years. The boy swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice, but the words would not come immediately. The millionaire did not rush him. Instead, he waited patiently, giving the boy space to breathe, to feel, to understand that his courage mattered. And slowly, the boy began to speak again, not shouting this time, but with steady, heartfelt words. He told the man about his family, about the long days of work, about the dreams that kept him going despite hunger and hardship. He spoke about his desire to learn, to grow, and to one day create a better life, not just for himself but for those he loved. With every word, the millionaire nodded, occasionally asking questions that encouraged the boy to explain further. "What do you hope for most?" he asked. "What drives you to keep going?" The boy answered honestly, speaking not of money or fame, but of freedom, respect, and the chance to make a difference. The crowd watched in astonishment. They had expected the boy to be silenced, laughed at, or ignored, but instead, he was standing shoulder to shoulder with a man who had once seemed untouchable. The millionaire's reaction went beyond words. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook, handing it to the boy. "Write down your dreams," he said. "And never stop believing that you can achieve them. Courage like yours does not go unnoticed." The boy took it, his fingers shaking, tears welling in his eyes. He had never been recognized like this before, never felt that his struggles, his hopes, and his dreams were valued. But the millionaire's reaction was more than encouragement, it was a lesson. He spoke about failure, about perseverance, and about how every person, regardless of wealth, background, or age, could take small steps toward change. He told the boy that the world often overlooked the brave, but it could not ignore persistence, honesty, and courage. Every word sank deeply into the boy's heart, planting seeds that would grow into action in the years to come. Finally, the millionaire stepped back, looking at the boy one last time before moving on. But the boy did not feel small. He did not feel dismissed. Instead, he felt alive, powerful, and seen in a way he never had before. He had learned that courage could bridge worlds, that one brave act could draw the attention of someone who seemed untouchable, and that recognition was not about who you were, it was about the bravery to stand up and be heard. As the millionaire disappeared into the crowd, the boy clutched the notebook tightly. His heart swelled with hope and determination. The world had shifted in a single moment, and he understood now that bold actions, no matter how frightening, could open doors that once seemed impossible. The encounter had ended, but its impact was just beginning. For the first time, he truly believed that life could change, that dreams could be reached, and that courage could rewrite destiny. The boy's heart was still racing, but now a different feeling settled over him, hope, tinged with nervous excitement. The millionaire had stopped just a few feet away, his eyes still fixed on the boy, and for the first time, it felt like the two were on the same level, not as rich and poor, powerful and powerless, but as human beings, connected through honesty and courage. The boy took a deep breath and stepped forward, unsure of what to say next, but knowing that this moment could change everything. The millionaire spoke first, his voice calm and steady, yet carrying warmth that put the boy slightly at ease. "Tell me," he said, "what is it that you dream of most? Not money. Not fame. What do you truly wish for?" The question caught the boy off guard. He had thought of wealth, of comfort, of better food and a safe home, but when he looked into the millionaire's attentive eyes, he realized that what he truly wanted was something deeper, freedom, respect, and the ability to make a difference. I want to make life better for my family," the boy said finally, his voice trembling slightly. I want my mother to rest without worry, my siblings to grow without fear, and for me. I want to be someone who can help, not just survive." He paused, unsure if his words made sense. But the millionaire nodded, and that small gesture gave the boy courage to continue. "You have already taken the hardest step," the millionaire said. "You spoke when everyone else stayed silent. You risked embarrassment and rejection. That is courage. And courage is the foundation of everything else. Dreams mean nothing without action, and action means nothing without belief." The boy listened intently, absorbing every word as though they were seeds being planted in his heart. The conversation turned deeper. The millionaire shared stories from his own life, stories of failures, setbacks, and mistakes that had almost broken him. He spoke of the nights he had gone without food, the businesses that had failed, and the people who had doubted him. But he also spoke of the determination to keep going, the persistence that refused to let circumstances define him, and the importance of learning from every mistake. The boy's eyes widened. He had assumed that the millionaire's life had always been perfect, but now he realized that success was not a gift, it was a battle, fought with patience, resilience, and courage. "Every failure is a lesson," the millionaire said. "Every struggle is training for the life you want to build." And most importantly, he leaned slightly closer, his voice low and serious, "Never let anyone tell you that your background limits you. Your life is not defined by where you start, but by the steps you take, the risks you dare to take, and the courage you show when it matters most." The boy nodded, his mind racing. He felt a spark ignite, a mix of hope and determination that had been simmering quietly for years, now flaring into a flame. He realized that his shouting, his boldness in speaking up, had not only drawn the millionaire's attention but had opened a door into a new world, a world where he could begin turning dreams into reality. The millionaire smiled, seeing the boy's transformation unfold before him. He offered practical advice, too, about learning skills, seeking knowledge, and building connections with people who shared his vision. He emphasized small, consistent steps, reminding the boy that even the greatest empires are built brick by brick, day by day, with patience and dedication. The boy listened, absorbing every lesson, every suggestion, and every story as though it were a treasure chest of tools to shape his own life. By the end of the conversation, the boy felt a sense of clarity he had never known. The fear that had always accompanied his dreams was replaced with determination. He realized that courage could be contagious, that honesty could create opportunity, and that one bold moment could alter the course of a lifetime. The millionaire had not only acknowledged him but had given him guidance, a roadmap to transform hope into action. As the millionaire prepared to leave, he placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Remember," he said, "your voice, your courage, and your determination will carry you farther than luck ever could. Keep dreaming. Keep working. And never stop believing in yourself." The boy watched him walk away, clutching the small notebook the millionaire had given him earlier. He felt as if the world had suddenly expanded, and he was no longer confined to the narrow streets of his neighborhood. A new chapter had begun, and for the first time, he believed with every fiber of his being that change was possible, and it would start with him. The encounter with the millionaire had left the boy's heart pounding with excitement and hope, but now the real work began. He returned to his small home, clutching the notebook the millionaire had given him, and for the first time, he saw it not as paper but as a symbol, a map to a new life, filled with possibilities. That night, after helping his mother with chores and tucking his siblings into bed, he opened the notebook and began writing. He wrote down every dream, every goal, and every action he could take to make them real. It was as if the words themselves carried energy, fueling his determination to rise above his circumstances. The boy understood that courage alone was not enough. Dreams needed action. He started waking up earlier, using the quiet hours of the morning to study by candlelight. Even when the house was cold and the hunger in his stomach was sharp, he forced himself to focus, repeating the millionaire's words over and over, "Every failure is a lesson. Your life is not defined by where you start." Each sentence became a mantra, guiding him to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the path. He also began seeking out new opportunities. He asked neighbors if they needed help with chores, errands, or small jobs, and he worked tirelessly, saving every coin he earned. Some days were exhausting, and some days felt discouraging, but he remembered the way the millionaire had listened to him, had valued him, had believed in him. That memory became a source of strength. He knew that persistence and hard work could open doors that fear and doubt would keep closed. Education became his priority. Even though he had missed classes before due to poverty and work, he now committed to catching up. He asked teachers for extra guidance, borrowed old textbooks whenever he could, and spent hours rewriting lessons in his notebook. Learning was no longer just a requirement, it was his weapon, his tool to break free from the limitations imposed by his life. He studied not only for himself but for his family, imagining the day when he could lift them all out of struggle and into comfort. But transformation was not only about learning and working. The boy also began helping others in his neighborhood, teaching younger children what he had learned, sharing advice, and encouraging them to dream as he did. He realized that courage was contagious, and by lifting others, he was strengthening himself. He found joy in these small acts of kindness, understanding that true success was measured not only by personal gain but by the impact one could have on others. Months turned into years, and the boy's dedication began to show results. His skills improved, his confidence grew, and he started noticing changes in how people treated him. Neighbors respected his determination, teachers praised his effort, and even strangers began to notice the difference in the boy who had once been invisible. Every small step forward felt like a victory, and each victory reinforced the lesson he had learned from that first bold moment when he had yelled to the millionaire. Courage and action, combined, could indeed create change. Yet the boy never forgot where he had come from. He remembered the long nights, the hunger, the struggle, and the way his heart had burned with hope when he first dared to dream. That memory kept him humble, patient, and motivated. He understood that transformation was not about forgetting the past but using it as fuel, turning hardship into strength, and fear into action. Each day, he pushed himself a little further, worked a little harder, and dreamed a little bigger. By the time the boy was a young man, he had become a symbol in his neighborhood, not because of wealth or fame, but because of determination, resilience, and courage. His life had begun to change, brick by brick, step by step. He had learned that transformation was a process, not a single event, and that every choice, every effort, and every act of bravery mattered. The boy who had once shouted into the square had grown into a young man who acted decisively, who worked tirelessly, and who believed, with every fiber of his being, that dreams could become reality if one refused to give up. And so, the transformation began, not overnight, not without struggle, but through courage, persistence, and unwavering belief. The boy had taken the first steps, and now he was walking a path that would lead him to the life he had once only imagined, a life shaped by hope, determination, and the boldness to seize the opportunities that had once seemed impossible. Years had passed since that fateful day when the poor boy had yelled to the millionaire, a moment that had seemed impossible at the time but had become the turning point of his life. The boy was no longer a boy, he had grown into a young man, stronger, wiser, and determined to make a difference not just for himself, but for everyone he loved. The struggles of his childhood had not disappeared, they were still part of his story, but they had become the foundation of his success, the lessons that shaped him into someone capable of facing any challenge. His transformation was evident in everything he did. The small jobs he had once performed to earn coins had turned into meaningful work, building skills and knowledge that propelled him forward. Education, which had once seemed like a distant dream, became his ally, opening doors to opportunities he had only imagined as a child. He had learned that perseverance and courage were more powerful than fear and doubt, and he applied those lessons every day. Even when obstacles arose, he remembered the moment he had shouted, the moment he had refused to remain invisible, and he pressed on with renewed determination. Success, however, was not measured solely in wealth. The young man had never forgotten the struggles of his mother, the laughter and tears of his siblings, or the small neighborhood that had shaped him. He invested in his family first, ensuring that his mother could rest without worry, that his siblings had access to education and opportunities, and that their home was filled with safety, warmth, and love. Each improvement in their lives reminded him why he had dared to yell that day, why he had chosen courage over fear, and why dreams, when acted upon, could reshape reality. The young man also looked beyond his family. He became a mentor, a guide, and a source of inspiration for children in his old neighborhood, sharing his story and encouraging them to dream, to act, and to believe. He taught them that circumstances do not define a person, that even those born into struggle can rise to greatness through determination and courage. The lessons he had received from the millionaire were passed on, multiplied, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined as a small boy. Reflection became a part of his routine. Late at night, when the world was quiet, he would think back to that one bold moment, the moment his voice, trembling but fierce, had reached someone who could change his life. He remembered the fear, the hope, the pounding of his heart, and the thrill of being seen. And he realized that the power of that moment had never come from the millionaire alone, it had come from within himself. The courage to act, the belief in his dreams, and the refusal to remain silent had set everything into motion. That realization gave him confidence, humility, and a sense of gratitude that guided him through each new challenge. He also understood the responsibility that came with success. Being seen, being heard, and achieving his dreams did not mean he could forget where he came from. Instead, it meant he had the power, and the duty, to create opportunities for others, to inspire, to uplift, and to share the lessons that had changed his life. His past struggles had become his compass, guiding him toward meaningful choices and purposeful action. Looking back, the young man understood that life is not a straight path. It is shaped by moments of courage, by the decisions to act when fear wants to hold you back, and by the relentless pursuit of dreams despite obstacles. He had learned that one bold act, one yell into the unknown, could ripple through time, creating change far beyond what anyone could predict. That single moment had altered his destiny, but it had also taught him that destiny is not given, it is created through courage, action, and unwavering belief. And so, the boy who had once been poor, hungry, and overlooked had become a symbol of hope, perseverance, and courage. His story was no longer just his own, it belonged to everyone who had ever dreamed of a better life, everyone who had felt invisible, and everyone who needed proof that bravery, determination, and belief could change everything. The young man smiled, holding the notebook that had once been a gift and now was a reminder, that life's greatest victories often begin with a single courageous step, a single shout, and the unshakable belief that a better tomorrow is always within reach.